Welcome and good morning. I'm already going to start crying, and it's going to be a great Friday morning. I'm Michelle Miao, a member of the Board of Governors for the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California, also a producer and host. The Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California is an iconic institution that was formed right here in San Francisco over 120 years ago, all dedicated to bringing thought leaders such as yourselves together to discuss civic issues of our time. On behalf of our host organizations, PRC, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, San Francisco Community Health Center, and the National AIDS Memorial, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. Today, we are going to take you on an historic journey of over 40 years in our fight against HIV/AIDS. While we have experienced heartbreak, we have also experienced hope. And through that hope and resilience, we have made great progress. And all of that progress would not be possible without all of you who are in this room today, all of our speakers and performers who will be on this stage, and of course, our special guest, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. While we reflect on the progress that we have made, we know that today we still have work to do. And the work we will do. So let's get our program started. I'd like to welcome up our leaders of our host organizations for their welcome remarks. Please welcome Dr. Deborah Hawks of PRC, Dr. Tyler Tamir of the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, Lance Thoma of the San Francisco Community Health Center, and John Cunningham of the National AIDS Memorial.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. To Speaker Emerita, what an honor to be able to be with you today. All of our esteemed colleagues and guests, it's a privilege to welcome you. On behalf of PRC and these wonderful partner organizations, the National AIDS Memorial, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and San Francisco Community Health Center, we want to thank our generous sponsors for helping to make this event possible. Our lead community sponsor, the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, Genentech, UCSF, PRC board members Darren Smith and Klaus Jelinski, and Shira Willis, and partner hosts, the Commonwealth Club and Gilead. Many thanks to Kristen Lloyd, the harpist, who played so beautifully, and to Daniel Ripley Catering for the delicious bites that they provided in the reception. The fact that our four organizations are standing together today is intentional. HIV has always required courageous partnership, as no single organization, institution, or leader has ever solved this epidemic alone. Progress has only been possible because people chose collaboration over competition, compassion over fear, and action over complacency. That spirit of partnership is what brings us together this morning. We're also here in partnership with someone whose leadership has uplifted the community for decades. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi has been a steadfast champion for people living with HIV and the organizations that serve them. Her commitment has helped secure the resources, the policies, and federal leadership that allowed community-based organizations like ours not only to survive, but to innovate, grow, and most importantly, save lives. PRC's story is one of community-driven evolution. What began in 1982 as the AIDS Emergency Fund, supported by simply penny jars on countertops across San Francisco, has grown into today's Emergency Financial Assistance Program, where we've distributed more than $40 million to help people living with HIV remain housed, pay essential bills, and navigate times of crisis. This is what can happen when leaders in government work with community organizations. On a personal note, the work is deeply meaningful to me. In 2019, I was living in Georgia, still in corporate healthcare, Speaker Emerita. It was a defining year in your career. The first speaker in more than 60 years to regain the gavel. You received the John F. Kennedy Profile in Courage Award, and this directly influenced me, as it did many other women leaders, to leave corporate healthcare, to get out of the corporate executive role, and to transition into public healthcare and nonprofit life. It means everything that you've mentored and influenced so many from afar that you may not even know about. And I thank you for that. The opportunity to come to San Francisco and lead an organization like this and follow in your vision and advocacy was one I could not pass up. Your bold leadership reaches so far beyond California, and it has inspired so many to be a part of this community. But this is also about responsibility. Too many communities continue to experience inequities in prevention, treatment, and access to care. Our responsibility is to build on the legacy that we've inherited and ensure that the next generation experiences an HIV response that is even more supportive and compassionate. This morning, we will honor the past, celebrate the progress that has been made, and recommit ourselves to the work ahead. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Tyler Termeer, and I proudly serve as the CEO of San Francisco AIDS Foundation. As I reflected for a moment on what I would say this morning, I found myself thinking about the Denver Principles, written in 1983 by people living with AIDS who refused to be defined by fear, stigma, and by silence. They demanded not just compassion, but power, voice, and a seat at the table. In many ways, they articulated a principle that has guided movements for justice ever since. Nothing about us should ever be decided without us. And today, that principle feels as urgent as ever. You know, we are living through a moment where the very communities that we serve and the organizations, all of us on this stage that are entrusted to serve them, face existential threats. We are witnessing coordinated attacks on public health, on science, on LGBTQ+ people, on trans communities, on the very idea that every person deserves dignity, care, and the freedom to live authentically. But if the HIV movement has taught us anything, it's this: progress has never been inevitable. Progress has always been organized. It has always been powered by community mobilization, courageous partnership, and leaders willing to innovate in the face of extraordinary opposition. That same spirit of innovation continues today, from advocates in HIV prevention and treatment to reimagining how we deliver care, expand access, and advance health equity. Public health leadership means refusing in this moment to stand still when people's lives depend on us moving forward. And also, on a personal note, as someone who is Black, queer, and living with HIV for more than 2 decades of my life, I know personally that my life and my ability to stand before you today is only possible because generations before me refused to accept that things could not change. They organized, they fought, they imagined something better. And that is the responsibility that we inherit, all of us in this room, all of us around the country, to continue advancing prevention, treatment, and equity, to protect public health, and to ensure that those who are most impacted remain at the center of every single decision that we make, because movements don't belong to history. They belong to every generation willing to carry them forward. And that belongs to all of us. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lance Thoma, CEO of San Francisco Community Health Center, and also the co-chair of the San Francisco HIV/AIDS Providers Network. And from both of those vantage points, what I want to say is that San Francisco is bold and boastful when it comes to our beloved HIV model of care. Our HIV community has created a superb, first-class, seamless, coordinated, culturally competent, community-centered model of care that focuses on everyone who is impacted by HIV, with an intentional focus on the most marginalized communities here in San Francisco: trans folks, immigrants, people of color, homeless individuals, long-term survivors. This is why we, here in our city, are on our way to getting to zero when it comes to new HIV infections. And we could only be at this point after nearly 45 years because of Speaker Pelosi's leadership and love. Year after year, you and your team have fought with us and for us to maintain our Ryan White funding, the Minority AIDS Initiative, CDC HOPWA funding. Even you went above and beyond in 2008 when our city's Ryan White Care Award took a big hit, and you fought for millions of dollars for San Francisco, and that has kept us going. Your bravery and courage contributed to San Francisco Community Health Center's ability to fight back against the Trump administration. When our CDC HIV prevention funding for trans communities was terminated outright last year in February, we jumped into a lawsuit with Lambda Legal, along with lead plaintiff, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and we have been winning and retaining our funding ever since. But even more importantly, we are declaring that trans communities will never be erased, and our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and people of color will never waver. I first met our speaker when San Francisco Community Health Center was formerly known as Asian and Pacific Islander Wellness Center. Speaker Pelosi, I got to work with you to launch the first annual National Asian and Pacific Islander HIV Awareness Day, May 19th, 2005. We were then, after that, immensely honored to be able to present you with our Health Justice Champion Award in 2023. And all of us here today are abundantly grateful to you, your leadership, your tireless advocacy, and your love for our city and its most vulnerable people. Thank you.
My name is John Cunningham, and I have the privilege to serve as the CEO of the National AIDS Memorial, which includes both the Memorial Grove in Golden Gate Park, as well as the AIDS Memorial Quilt. Before I begin my remarks, I would like to take a moment just to remember a true champion for civil rights, human dignity, and a friend of our community, John Lewis, who we lost 6 years ago today. This morning we gather to honor a leader whose courage has never been measured by the office she has held, but by the people she has chosen to stand beside. Courageous leadership is not about waiting until it is safe to act. It is about stepping forward when others hesitate, speaking when silence is easier, and standing with communities whose humanity is too often questioned. For more than 4 decades, Speaker Emerita Pelosi has embodied that kind of leadership for the HIV and AIDS community. As we celebrate all that you have done for this community, we are reminded that remembrance is not about looking backward. It is about carrying forward. We remember countless lives that were cut short due to HIV and AIDS. We remember activists, doctors, nurses, caregivers, scientists, advocates who refused to allow stigma and fear to define our future. Their stories are not simply history. They are the foundation upon which we continue to build this movement. Because legacy belongs to everyone. Legacy is not reserved for those who hold public office or whose names appear in the history books. It is created every time someone chooses compassion over indifference, justice over silence, and hope over despair. Speaker Emerita Pelosi, your commitment has ensured that those lives that were cut short and those who fought so courageously will never be forgotten. Your visionary leadership secured national recognition for the AIDS Memorial Grove in Golden Gate Park, creating a place here in San Francisco where generations can come to heal, remember, and most importantly, find hope. Today, as we honor your extraordinary leadership, we also recommit ourselves to the work ahead. Because remembrance is not the end of the story. Remembrance is the future work we all are committed to doing. On behalf of a grateful city, a grateful community, and a grateful nation, thank you for all that you have done. As has already been recognized, we are deeply appreciative to Gilead Sciences for helping to make today's gathering possible, and for all the work and support that that organization has done for so many of us. It is my honor to introduce Larkin Callahan. Larkin serves as the Executive Director of Global HIV Advocacy at Gilead Sciences, where she leads strategic advocacy, communications, public affairs initiatives that advance scientific innovation, health equity, and access around the world. Previous to her work at Gilead, she held roles at UCSF with Paul, at the PEPFAR, numerous community-based organizations, Stanford University, where she partnered with government, industry, and NGOs, including the UN, the World Health Organization, State Department, and foreign ministries. As a former UN correspondent, research journalist, she has also reported on global crises to help elevate understanding underrepresented voices across traditional and emerging platforms. A sixth-generation San Franciscan, Larkin earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Southern California and completed graduate and postgraduate work at Columbia University. Please help me in welcoming to the stage Larkin Callahan.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, John, for that introduction. I'm thrilled to be here on behalf of all of our teams at Gilead, among so many friends and colleagues. The story of HIV advocacy is a story of transformation. What began as a response to an unimaginable crisis became a movement that redefined public health, reshaped government response, and demonstrated the power of community leadership. The people we'll hear from today didn't simply respond to that moment. They built something entirely new. New models of care, new partnerships, new policies, and new hope for generations to come. They challenged the status quo, reimagined what compassionate care could look like, and forged partnerships that forever changed the relationship between community, government, industry, and healthcare, and influenced how these stakeholders work together across other therapies as well. As new innovative treatment and prevention modalities continue to develop, offering those living with HIV and those using PrEP to live long and healthy lives, it's crucial that we reflect on those early pivotal years. And this panel will explore how the foundation they built continues to guide and inspire their work today. It has been my great pleasure to work for and alongside many of the folks on this panel. And as a native San Franciscan growing up in the 80s, it was clear that our city was doing things differently. And that is thanks to the leadership that we'll hear from today. Please join me in welcoming our panel for From Crisis to Progress, the early years of HIV advocacy. Dr. Paul Volberding, one of the first physicians to care for people living with AIDS in San Francisco, whose pioneering work helped transform HIV treatment. Speaker Emerita Pelosi, a steadfast congressional leader who's over 4 decades helped shape policies and investments that transformed HIV responses. Mike Shriver, communication strategist whose storytelling and advocacy has helped elevate public understanding of HIV and mobilize support during pivotal and crucial times. And Cecilia Chung, an internationally respected civil rights leader whose advocacy has expanded equity, visibility, and access to care for transgender communities and people living with HIV. Please do look at their full bios in the program. Please join me in welcoming our panel. Thank you.
All right, and I'm Michelle Miao will be moderating this fantastic panel. Well, every movement like this all starts with individuals like yourselves and crossing a line. And so I think it's good to start with what was that moment for you, that moment that you crossed the line from being a witness of the crisis to being part of it. Dr. Volberding, I think it's good to start with you.
Good. So, I was privileged to be there, before there was the crisis, when I saw my first patient on my first day at San Francisco General Hospital on July 1st, 1981, a young man with Kaposi sarcoma who was obviously already dying at 22. And what we learned in the care of our patients in the early days really paved the way for what we would see for the next decades. The fear, the loneliness that people had, the isolation, the stigma, all of that was apparent in the very first patients that we saw. And responding to those needs was something that I think to all of us at the General kind of came naturally. We saw the needs, we were there to take care of our patients' needs, whatever they were, and they really did have severe needs. So we responded, and we'll talk about the speakers. I'm going to call you the speaker, just out of wishing. Really.
I'll call you Paul.
Okay. Anyway, the early days were really significant, and we remember them, unfortunately, all too well. Yeah.
We'll save Speaker Emerita for last, and so hop back to Cecilia.
Me? So I think it's almost like where my story begins, because I moved to the U.S. in 1984 at the age of 19, trying to find my path forward, going to school and trying to do everything a good Chinese child would do for the parents, and trying to take accounting classes, and it sucked. And and then I found San Francisco. And at the end of 1984, that's when I moved up to San Francisco. And some of you might remember that time. It's actually pretty dark, but it was my coming out. So it was a big contrast because coming out usually means that you're celebrating, you're going to clubs, and you dance, and you drink, and you hook up, and but in that time in San Francisco, the clubs that we go in, it's half empty. Sometimes it's completely emptied. I remember there were 3 different clubs on Polk Street. Well, some of them are no longer there. Well, actually, all of them not there. And Busby and Phoenix and Castro. Some people might have gone there. And
I've been there.
And that's how I was introduced to, being LGBT at the time. And I never really thought too much about HIV at the time because there weren't too much to think about. The message I got, and most people got from posters they see or stories they read, are scary stories. It's almost like they're trying to scare you from doing anything that might lead you to contract HIV. I remember the Kaposi sarcoma. I remember the shingles. I remember people with wasting and dementia. And it's just the most horrible pictures you can think of. That's what they put on the bus stops and in clubs. It was dark, and for me, the most important part at that time was somehow I knew I am going to have a relationship with this pandemic at the time. I didn't know how because there was a lot of misinformation then, and we all knew that there was no cure, back in the 80s, and there was no cure until the mid-90s. And that's how I got introduced to the gay scene and also the world of HIV. I myself contracted HIV in 1992 when I was 27. And well, yeah, I'm still here, thank God. I thought that, I only had 6 months to live, and I have to tell my parents, okay, I'm gonna die, so take care, bye. There's no cell phone back then, by the way, so. And that's all I remember. And I think that for a lot of us at the time, we really appreciate organizations like I think it was called AIDS Legal Counsel at the time, AIDS Emergency Fund, and GCHIP, and many more organizations who were there to help us. And the one that I work for, Asian AIDS Project. So they already merged, and anyways, so without them, I don't think that I would be able to sit here to tell these stories, because there was a time when I couldn't manage my own life. So I can't even manage my own life. How am I going to manage my health? So I need a lot of support. And that's what I got from this community. And that's when I decided that I need to give back to the community. And since 1995, I've been working in the field of HIV and public health. Up until now. Now I'm just fighting because my community needs all the voices that they can gather to fight.
There's a couple different ways. I know a couple times when I crossed the line that actually caused a lot of consternation, like on the Golden Gate Bridge, or when we disrupted the opera, or when we occupied the INS office over bad policy. But as a gay man, I don't remember a time that didn't have AIDS as the forefront of the concern of my community. I was a Shanti volunteer. I was trained in 1985. And by 1987, there's a group of 10 of us, and I was in recovery. And of the group of 10 of us, I'm the only one left alive. Mm-hmm. And that repeated itself, and that's been repeating itself over my life. And living in the Castro, and I think I speak for a lot of the men who are in the room, walking down the Castro and seeing the look, like we know the look. And that was my neighborhood, that was my community. I fell into ACT UP accidentally. A friend of mine invited me to a meeting one night, and that's where I knew that I belonged, because I had so much anger and so much fear that I needed a place I needed to channel. And I found a community that said, there's a way to channel how you feel and to take your powerlessness and create power. And for me, the idea that it was nonviolent and direct action, and that it created buzz, and that it created this sense of exigency, that became the way that I looked at my work in the HIV epidemic. And I started working in HIV in 87. By 89, I was running a drug treatment program, and I got to watch the San Francisco model be built. I got to be in the presence of Reggie Williams, and I got to be in the presence of Steve Liu and Sandra Hernandez, and watching as we created this system that, for me, the San Francisco model is an activist model. It fundamentally challenged the way we did public health and public advocacy. I ended up accidentally in 1988 in a meeting with Nancy Pelosi, with one of my mentors in ACT UP, who needed to get a drug because he had CMV retinitis, and the drug that he needed to take for CMV retinitis, he could not take his AZT with that drug. And he discovered that there was a drug in Sweden that he could take, but they couldn't release it here in the US. So I got invited along. I got to tag along with Terry to meet with Representative Pelosi. And Terry's first words to Nancy, it's indelible, he said, "I didn't vote for you, but I expect you to take care of me." She said, "That's exactly what I'm supposed to do." And what's amazing is that that's how I built my relationship with the speaker, was that was the relationship between her office and the community, was this sort of partnership. I take for granted what we have and what we had here in the city. I think I also crossed the line the day that I was sitting in the speaker's office, and we had this AIDS advocacy day that we would do, AIDS Watch. And I had 8 mothers from this group called Mothers' Voices, which were moms of kids who had HIV, who had died of AIDS. And I had 8 moms from around California. We went and met with the speaker and introduced them one at a time to the speaker by mom and by child. And we had a great meeting, and all of them were jealous of our relationship of what we had in San Francisco. They wished, God, I wish we had this in Orange County. Well, we all wished that. But we wished that we had this. Fast forward to a year later at the next AIDS Watch, 7 of those moms came back with me to a meeting with Nancy. Without a prompt, to the mother, Nancy introduced herself to them by name, remembering each of their names and each of their children. And I thought, this is spectacular that the person that everybody on the Hill looked to for AIDS advice, for AIDS policy, for AIDS support, was able to remember the mother from Orange County whose son was sick with HIV the year before and asked how that son was doing. So for me, I guess those are the lines that I crossed, because it was this expectation that I just assumed this is how we were supposed to do public-private partnership, how we were supposed to do that mobilization process. I've come to see that that's not the case. I wish we had more of it, but it really, really was an amazing lesson in civics and of ethics.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, you crossed the line again by spending too much time talking about me. But I do appreciate our friendship, and I am thrilled personally in every way on your recovery and how well you are doing. It's an honor to be with you, with Cecilia, with Paul. And again, thank you for bringing us together, Michelle, in such an important way. It is, let me just say, I appreciate all the kind things that people have said. I want to thank Deborah, again, Dr. Hawks, Tyler, Lance, John, and Serge. Serge, to be coming up soon, for what you have said about this cause. And it's all been about collaboration. I accept a compliment on behalf of all of you, because it would never have happened without all of you. Certainly would not have happened without Paul Loberding. He was the mentor. I mean, he gave us confidence that we could go out there and say what had to be said, because we knew we had the scientific justification for it. So we'll go back, long before I was in Congress, we had this, I get 87, this was a half a dozen years in between the first diagnosis. It wasn't even called AIDS then. It wasn't even called AIDS. And I'll just tell you a couple anecdotes that may. So we were trying to get the Democratic National Convention in San Francisco for 1984. So in 1983, the convention selection committee was coming around to the cities, and we had to make our presentation. Well, preceding their coming, people around the country said, well, you never go there. You could never go there with HIV/AIDS. People will die. People can't, all this stuff. And we were so, shall we say, confident that they were wrong and that we were right and that they should come to San Francisco. So one anecdote I love to tell is, because I have 5 children. They were young at the time, little children at the time, and they were my, shall we say, what do you call it? They supplied the food. They were my they said it was slave labor, children labor, but nonetheless, they mashed the avocados and put up the cheese, put out the bread, all this stuff. So I said to the kids, when we would have a night, like we'd have the African American community, the Asian Pacific, the Hispanic community, Latino community, but one night we're having them come to our home, to our home for our meeting with the HIV, well, at the time it was gay and lesbian community, so that they see the pride we take. I'm having my home, all this stuff. So on the table we have all these crudité, vegetables and things, and the guacamole and the dips. So I said to the kids, when you're talking, when you nicely, politely talk to one of the guests from the committee, at the same time dip your carrot in the avocado when one of our LGBTQ, one of our gay men sticks his carrot in. So you're eating from the same bowl, these little children. And of course, I just lived by that bowl, and all of the guys would come up. It was mostly guys at the time, but many women, many from the lesbian community too, that we would just show them we are eating from the same bowl. So don't hand us anything about what your other competitive cities comedian would say about us. So it was, we won the convention. We didn't win the election, but we won the convention. They said, oh, you can't go there. There'll be blood in the streets because it's going to be so. But it was wrong. It was wrong. First of all, it was wrong because people were sick and we needed to meet their needs. Second of all, why would we discriminate in a way that wasn't even true? Because that's what most discrimination is, falsehoods. Okay, then so we go fast forward. I get elected to Congress a few years later. We continue the advocacy with the community. And so many things happened there, not because of my inside maneuvering, that was important, but because of the outside mobilization. San Francisco made all the difference in the world and in the lives of people and their families who were embracing them with HIV/AIDS. Steve Morin was on my staff. I don't know if Steve is here, but he then became associated with UCSF. He was remarkable. He was remarkable. One thing that you may not know, because we talk about legislation, we talk about funding, we talk about policy, but one policy that made a tremendous difference that doesn't get the attention it deserves is that we passed a bill. I won't even go into what we were dealing with on the other side, but we passed a bill that said that a person, once we had gotten money for people with HIV/AIDS, could get money for HIV/AIDS, not just because they were fully diagnosed with AIDS, but because they were HIV positive. They then got disability for that. That was a very big deal because by the time they had for the diagnosis of AIDS, full-blown AIDS, it was not at that time, almost too late. So that bill made all the difference. Why? Because you told us our people are suffering. They need help. They need help not just when they're fully contracted, but when they're just diagnosed. So later, of course, as science and the rest, as Gilead and of course Genentech and others would help on the outside, research and all of this, people who are diagnosed with HIV would live long lives. One of them is Dan Bernal, who is here, was long time my chief of staff. He's now a chancellor of HIV/AIDS. But when he talks about act up, people thought they acted up too much. They did. They said, I said, you know what? You think that's a lot of acting up? People are dying. We're going to 2 funerals a day or 3 a week or something like that. People are dying. Jerry Berg, Jim Foster, some of our old friends that we all knew, but then they were dying. And you think that activism is too much? That's your problem. That's your problem. Because this, on the outside, not that every single thing they did would be something you might do yourself, I'm not sure, but nonetheless. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. As this 250th anniversary of our country, on the 6th anniversary of the passing of John Lewis, who was our hero in every way, and by the way, a champion for the quilt. He was in Atlanta for a while, and he took great pride in that. Also, he was a champion of the Equality Act, which is essential that we pass. But a lot of people didn't want to open up the Civil Rights Bill because of what's there. You never know what they might try to do to the Civil Rights Bill. So people were reluctant to go that far, because that's what it does. It opens the Civil Rights Bill, injects everything, non-discrimination against everything. And John Lewis said, no, it's long overdue. So I just want to salute him for that aspect of it. But in this 250th anniversary, I say to the community again and again, you've heard me, I know Tyler has, some of his, thank you for your patriotism. What our founders had in mind, they believed that democracy could survive because they believed in the goodness of people. And they believed in the public having an impact on policy, that people would speak out. They had the Constitution where they said the president's elected for 4 years, the Congress for 2. So it would be a check on the presidential. And of course, activism in elections is important, not to talk politics, but civics, important at this time as well. So I thank the community because without the outside mobilization, which was so intense, so necessary, I love that. Where is it? The resilience of hope. Some of the teenagers that I talk with around, they say, hope is our resilience. Our resilience is hope. It goes both ways. But know the power of the outside mobilization. We never would have passed the Affordable Care Act without the outside mobilization. We never saved it without the outside mobilization. We're never going to restore all the benefits of it without outside mobilization. But this community led the way. Others used you as a model with breast cancer, with the other kinds of diagnoses, mobilizing, following the lead of this community, with the outside speaking out in various different ways, each group according to their enthusiasm for it. And so when you're talking about me here, it seems like I'm like, no, it's about all of us. Every role that was played. I mean, Dr. Roberting is my hero. I've quoted him more than I've quoted Abraham Lincoln. I mean, well, he knows. And so just to draw to conclusion, I didn't say that yet. This time I mean it. Here we are. Finally, as everybody knows, I went to the floor the first day. My first remarks were, I'm here to fight against HIV/AIDS. And I didn't even think that was an issue. And other people said, why would you say that? Why would you want to be known for that in your first day in Congress? Why'd you say you came here to fight against AIDS? I said, okay, because I did. Okay, that's why I did. But it took time. One thing I was ignorant of was discrimination, because we just don't know that here. We just don't know that here. People are sick, we care for them. So that was one thing we had to. So by the time they were ready for the Ryan White Care Act to be law, the Ryan White Care Act was modeled in San Francisco. Community-based, Lance knows this, community-based care, community-based research, community-based prevention. Mm-hmm. I had to teach my men some prevention things with bananas and stuff like that, which they weren't so receptive to, but nonetheless, I'm a mom of 5, I can do that kind of thing. But in any event, it was all from here. Thank you, San Francisco. Thank you to our scientists, our medical providers, our grassroots organizers, our caregivers in every way. So San Francisco, LGBTQ now community, larger community, take pride in the difference that you have made. It has saved lives, and we can talk more about that if you wish. But in any event, I accept this recognition on behalf of all of you, because the collaboration was the magic of it all. Thank you for that.
Well, it's a good segue to share some personal stories. It sounds, that the 4 of you are very close, and through the 40 years of foundation building in this fight against HIV/AIDS, you probably have some incredible shared memories, the good and the bad. So why don't we start with Dr. Paul Volberding and sharing some of those memories?
The danger of sitting up here and listening to these memories and stories is that it brings up so much. I keep thinking, I could say this, I could say that. One thing that I was prompted to remember is that and I think a number of us, without really thinking about it, knowing that we were being photographed, made a point of touching our patients without gloves at a time when we didn't know what was going on, but we knew that was an important message. Mike's point about the mothers reminds me, as a father, how delighted I was when my oldest son was in DC and Nancy and Dan helped give him his first job as an unpaid intern before you were speaker. The pay came quickly, which we were, as parents, happy about. So I thank you for that personally.
Wait, when I became speaker, I said, we're paying the interns, okay?
But the serious thing is also that you've heard reference to the model of care, the San Francisco model of care. I kind of almost always call it the San Francisco general model of care, but that was my bias. But the model right from the very start, from that first patient that I mentioned, and realizing that we needed all the help we could get, and the help was going to be found in the community, that community organizations existed that responded immediately. Others arose from the need. Project Open Hand, Project Inform. I mean, you know the names, but we should really be celebrating that kind of advocacy. Where the need was identified, somebody responded. An organization happened. And I don't think there was any place on the planet where people with AIDS had access to the kind of resources and support that they really so desperately needed. So what happened in San Francisco really was a model. None of us get full credit for that, of course. It was really a community mobilization, and it continues to this day. To this day, people realize here that a threat to anyone's rights is a threat to all of our rights. And I think that's reflected in what we did with the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and it's clear that effort needs to continue. So the mobilization, the community partnership, between the physicians, the politicians, the public health departments, which were really important in the early epidemic, and thinking our way through this, are all part of what that model was, and we were all proud. I think we are all proud to be part of that model.
Go ahead, Cecilia.
So I can share many different stories, but I think the ones that I wanted to share today, in the past 40 years, I've learned a lot from the act of organizing and also the organized action that I never did the die-in. I don't want to lay on the floor. out of my reach. But I remember I really threw myself into the HIV work. I started with UCSF, it was called AIDS Health Project at the time, and now it's the Alliance Health, and we were doing HIV test counseling. I did that was because I did not like the person who gave me my result. I say that's so awful of him to say that I should take care of all my business in 6 months because I will die. So that's not a good way to, to trying to support somebody who just found out that they tested positive for HIV. So that's my first connections with the HIV world. And then moving forward, I got appointed to the HIV Planning Council where I met Mike, who was sitting there and making his flag, like making his flag. And that's a great impression, that was my first impression of you. People still do flagging. And it was there that I learned a lot about the current models that we're seeing everywhere. Because at that time, funding was already shrinking. And because the funding was shrinking, the Planning Council came up with the Center of Excellence model that was in early 2000s. And from that, we start moving those conversations into what we now call medical home. because we know that, having a model that actually provide as many of the services that you need in one place helps to help people to stay in care. And San Francisco is also the first city that have a public health clinic on Tuesday that served the transgender community. And it was because, we had amazing doctors and allies like Dr. Barry Seven at the time, who really saw the need, to meet people where they're at. That's also a big principles that the HIV community have. It's like patient-centered care. And it was through that, the transgender clinic, that they were able to see almost like over 400 patients, trans men, trans women, and a lot of them have a lot of different advanced chronic illnesses like diabetes, like HIV, and they come to care because they were coming for hormones. And I think that one of the sayings that they have at the time is, they came for their hormones, but they stay for their care. They stay for the primary care. And, and that's the kind of approach San Francisco had always been using, and it has a ripple effect in how healthcare system was being built across the country. And that's one of the proud moments I think I have. We had a lot of fight too, but I don't know how Mike was able to deal with it, because he was still able to focus on his flag while arguing. And then, it also something that I took back to my community. So I'm sure the speaker remember the whole ENDA situation. I was the first person who actually protested the speaker. And I didn't go into the office. I just stayed and downstairs and work with folks who comes, and I say that don't do anything that would don't harass the speaker's office. Don't do anything that would makes you look rude, because transgender people are very well educated and well mannered. So we just go in and write little notes and say that support ENDA and trans inclusive ENDA. So I'm sure that the speaker remembered, because somebody told me later that the speaker was upset because she never thought somebody was going to go to her office to protest. But it was a good way to work with the speakers, because that opens up conversations. ENDA is not going anywhere anymore, but there are other things that we're doing today to continue to fight.
Yeah.
But this is really important for me to say, that is, we've been doing this fight for as long as we can remember. So what's happening today in Washington is not something new. It's something that we already know that, that's how the pendulum swing, and we prepared for it. And we want to make sure that our next generation of leaders are prepared for it too. And I think that's part of the reason why we're sitting here and sharing these experiences.
If I just may, on the subject of ENDA, here's the thing. We had 4 things that we all agreed that we would do. We were going to do 4 things. We were going to pass hate crimes, full inclusive hate crimes legislation. We're going to pass ENDA. We're going to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and we're going to advance marriage equality. When we passed the because you said ENDA has gone by, but I'll tell you where ENDA is. But and we always welcome protesters, so somebody was giving you some cautious advice. But nonetheless, here's the thing: when we were doing the fully inclusive, and some of you've heard me say this, I know in our meetings and the rest, John certainly had. We had the bill. fully inclusive, LGBTQ, T in their Q. It wasn't coming out of committee. Business community was weighing in about bathrooms or something. It was like, well, that's really important, okay? People are dying and bathrooms are important. So in any case, they came to me and said, I was speaker at the time, new speaker, you can pass this in a minute if you take out trans. And I said, we wouldn't pass it in 100 years if we take out trans, because I'm never bringing up that bill. We will have a fully inclusive. Barney Frank, bless his heart and rest his soul, he spoke out about his personal experience. Matthew Shepard's mother came and lobbied the members too, because we had some Democrats, and we had a big majority, some of them from some places were not ready for this, or they didn't realize they were just yet. And so we did pass fully inclusive LGBTQ. Now, that's of course under. Now, in terms of ENDA, which I said that was the second thing, the community came and said, we want repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell next, instead of ENDA. Okay, well, we're ready for ENDA, but don't. So we do that. I promised it would be done by Christmas. Then they came to me and said, you realize you have to convince the President of the United States, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I said, we're going to have it by Christmas. And we did. President Obama established a committee. They made recommendations, all that stuff. But we, because of the outside mobilization, were able to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And that was the last bill I signed as Speaker when we lost the majority, was to pass that. Now, we go back to ENDA, and we have equality, because we said, why are we just doing ending discrimination in employment? That's what ENDA was, ending discrimination. We want everything. We want everything. We want everything. And so that Equality Act took the place of ENDA, and that is what we must pass. David Cicilline was the author. John Lewis was the person who just opened the door to the minorities in the Congress. That time is long overdue for us to do that. And that is our work before us, but it's ending discrimination against anything. Of course, the court helped on marriage, and I went that day for the arguments, because I know that's the only time I went. I said, I just want to use my ticket one day, the arguments on marriage equality. And the justices said, well, people seem to be breaking their necks getting over to support marriage. Why did this happen so fast? I said, it didn't happen fast. It didn't happen fast. People have died for decades. This did not happen fast. It happened because of the outside mobilization. Go right back to the first mobilizations out there, and then eventually ACT UP became a major part of that. But many organizations and groups across the country organizing, and so they did that. And then they said, well, when they asked the question, when you're in the Supreme Court, you have to sit still. So it's really hard to do when you hear this stuff. You have to sit still, or else they eject you, even if you're the Speaker of the House. That's what I was watching when the President went there. I thought, that guy's not going to last long. In any case, they said, do you think that the Republicans knew that the Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional when they passed it? That was the question. The Solicitor General gave an appropriate answer to that, but I wanted to jump up and say, they knew, of course, because when they passed that bill, a stinking, lousy, rotten bill called the Defense of Marriage, we said to the guy who introduced it, which of your marriages are you protecting, your first, your second, or your third marriage? And proof of it is that some years later, like when they had the majority in the aught years, they passed a bill that stripped the courts of the ability to rule on the constitutionality of the Defense of Marriage Act, because they knew it was not constitutional. So they did bad things all along, and they're continuing to do them, but that fight goes on. Let me just say on what you said about a home. We passed the HOPWA bill, Housing Opportunities for People with AIDS. I was on the banking committee at the time, which had housing as its major subcommittee. And so we put three of Chuck Schumer and Jim McDermott of Washington State, and I put this bill together. And it would say, and we had a model in San Francisco, a model of continuum of care, that you have people have a place to be, so they weren't homeless, but they had the continuum of care that they needed. People are like, wow, we're doing just one per one. We have housing with people with cancer. I said, we're talking about an immune system that cannot be on the street. We have to do this. So it was because there was some unease by some people, this or that. So what happened was, don't say I said this. What happened was, the leading Republican on the banking committee, was housing, but banking committee, a wonderful person, a woman from New Jersey. Republicans were different then than they are now. She was a good person. But she wasn't with us on this issue. She's loaded for bear to go to the floor and how come we're doing this for one disease and all that stuff. Late in the day before, sadly, her husband got a heart attack. He got better. We prayed for him. He eventually got better. But she wasn't there the day we brought up the bill on the floor the next day. So I call that divine intervention.
The hand of God.
Yeah. What a memory, what a memory. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I mean, I could sit up here all day long and listen to these stories, but I did want to give each of you a chance to address our future. I mean, we listened to the foundation that you've built, all that it takes, the advocacy, the science, the medicine, the political leadership. Thank you so much, Speaker. But let's end with your thoughts and a message for the future, especially the future generation who did not have to live through the crisis when you did. And we'll end with last words with Speaker Emeritus. So, Dr. Volverding, you lead the way.
So I think I know I speak for everybody here to say thank you so much for all of your leadership, for all of the years that you were helping us, helping our patients, helping the communities. And we really, really respect that and love you and will miss you. But we are glad to have you, glad to have you here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Celia? Mike? You want to go? Mike?
So I think it's important to give some context that when San Francisco legalized needle exchange, I'm looking at Dr. Guzzi, but when we actually moved to legalize needle exchange or actually make it possible here in the city, we were doing that with some assumptions and a little bit of empirical evidence. And by the time, 1997, when the Speaker had to defend it on the floor of the House, we had plenty of data. We are now in a place where evidence-based interventions are not driving public policy and not driving the response to the epidemic. In fact, they're being ignored. And we know what happens when evidence-based interventions are ignored. At one point in San Francisco, 1 in 25 San Franciscans had HIV and 1 in 50 were living with an AIDS diagnosis. We're now down to a place where we can envision, unlike any other city in the world, of ending the epidemic. And at the time we are the closest to ending the epidemic, we have an administration that is actively perpetuating the epidemic. The big strides we made with the Ryan White Care Act, with HIV prevention reform, with the Office of AIDS Research, with HOPWA, they all happened, in the times when it was the darkest. We're talking about the early 90s. This is before Bill Clinton. And I think it's incumbent upon us. We not only need a new Nancy in the Congress, but I think we need a rededication of the way in which we start thinking about how we push evidence-based interventions back into the public forum to actually drive the way we do public health. It's the only way we're going to break through back to the epidemic.
And I think that it's sad for me to see the polarizations, and in DC, of all these elected officials who were supposed to be elected to take care of us, but instead, there are some of them who are constantly trying to punish us because we are brave enough to love who we love, and we're brave enough to live out our life authentically. And I think that that's the conversations we have to go back to, because certain person. I say that they were here for you, and but the Democrats are here for them, them. And someone needs to tell them that has already been words in the dictionary before anybody used it for anything. So I think that we need to find ways to laugh at the ignorance that we are seeing, and we have to take it seriously, but we don't have to turn everything into a fight. Because when we fight, there's more resistance. And when we're not fighting, there's more chance for us to come to some mutual understanding. And I think that that's what I would like to see happening, like not just DC, also in City Hall and and politics everywhere in this country. You don't have to punish one group to make the other people happy to vote for you. That's not the way it should be. It should never be the way it should be, because that's not how the Constitution was being written. And why would we do anything different now?
Yep. Well, happily, one of the things that we have been able to do in a bipartisan way was under the leadership of President Bush, was PEPFAR. Just was quite remarkable, and he was very courageous. Fortunately, we were in the minority at the time, but I was the leader, and we said, we're going to go for PEPFAR, but you've got to go big, because we're not going to photo op for little PEPFAR. We know big PEPFAR. And Bono helped, and that was really important. But also, it was bipartisan. The 25 million, we think, lives were saved by PEPFAR. Just remarkable. I visited the clinics in all over Africa to see what the impact was, and people said to me, I thought I had HIV/AIDS. I could never tell my family because there was no recourse. But when the clinic was able to give us the drugs and I could be well, I could tell my family and I could live my life with authenticity. And so he made a tremendous difference. Of course, this new group wanted to stop funding PEPFAR, and we had a big fight about that. So I'm sorry. There were remarks that I didn't use, but don't worry, I'm not going to. And so, there is a place where we can find common ground. One of the sources that gives me courage is the families of people. I saw families say to me, how can you be doing that? These people ask for this, and you're asking me for money to help them. And I've said, no, yeah, I am, because you're wrong. Then somebody in their family was diagnosed HIV, and they completely changed. The love of family really made a big difference in not all, but many families in our country. So to the point that we can, again, our founders believed in the goodness of people. Believe, faith, goodness, charity, that gives us what's right in the middle, faith, hope, charity. So as we go forward, the biblical power to cure is more enhanced now than ever with all the scientific advancement. And so I never would have thought, Paul, when we were working together, we have worked, but when we start working together, that 30-some years later, we still wouldn't have an actual cure. We have improved the quality of life, we've enabled people to live, but we still want to have a cure. And that, I think, scientific opportunity is there to do so. But we need the funding to do it. One of the fights we did have with George Bush, he wanted to cut off the funding, limit the funding for National Institutes of Health. We had that fight, but the only way we won was by winning the election. And then Barack Obama increased the funding for the National Institutes of Health. So where does our hope spring from? It springs from the goodness of people. It springs from the urgency of it all. It springs from the fact that our scientists are showing us the way, as Michael said, evidence-based solutions that have a result that is positive. But again, none of it possible without the outside mobilization. Pretty soon, in another week or so, I'm not sure of the time, we're going to be celebrating Dr. Goosby's service, and thank you for your service. I'm so proud of all that he has done. I can't wait till we celebrate that day. I knew his mom's Jackie's father, Zoo, so we're proud of him. But also, Cleve Jones sent me his regrets that he couldn't be here because he had a medical emergency. But Cleve, with that quilt, let's just tell you this one thing. He came to me when I was a new member of Congress. He came with Art Agnews, who was new mayor of San Francisco. So we had this idea, Cleve had this idea, that they would have a quilt and people would make quilts of people with their names and all that. I said, look, Cleve, I'm a mom of 5 children. I went to a convent school and I know how to knit, sew, crochet, tape, all the darn, all that. And I don't sew. Nobody sews anymore. I don't understand why you're doing that. He said, people will sew. So I just want you to tell my shortcoming. I did not recognize that people would sew. Remarkable, remarkable. Thank you, John, for your leadership. Anyway, hope. It's based on faith and charity and advanced scientific research. They say to me, faith or science, take your pick. That's what they say. And we believe that's good. And I said, no. God gave us the science. The science will give us the answer. Thank you all so much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul Volberding, Cecilia Chung, Mike Shriver, and of course, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. Wow, that was so electrifying. I think one huge more round of applause for all of our speakers, right? Yes. For our next segment, let's welcome back to the stage Dr. Deborah Hawks of PRC.
So we will now begin the transition into an artistic rendering of the crisis in 3 phases. Phase one of the crisis is 1981 to 1996, silence into song. And perhaps I'm dating myself because, of course, I was very aware and my family was impacted with loss of loved ones during this very difficult time in the crisis. In 1981, a mysterious illness emerged and forever changed San Francisco and our nation. Fear spread quickly. Stigma was pervasive. Thousands of our neighbors, friends, and loved ones became ill, and far too many were lost. Yet, amid unimaginable grief, something extraordinary happened. Communities organized, activists demanded action, scientists searched for answers, and leaders stepped forward. As a newly elected member of Congress, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi became one of the earliest voices in Washington advocating for research, funding, and compassionate care for people living with HIV and AIDS. This first vignette honors those difficult years when silence gave way to courage and when loss inspired a movement. Please join us as we watch this artistic rendering of 1981 to 1996, Silence into Song, performed by Clara Abrahams as vocalist, accompanied by Emmett Van Leer as pianist.
My brother lived in San Francisco. He said he finally found his place. And when I go to San Francisco, everywhere I look, I see his face. But and I faced childhood under stark Montana skies, and Bud, he seemed to always have cities in his eyes. He longed for possibility. He lived to move away, and he finally found his dream in the city by the bay. this clown. His jokes hit deeper rivers that bubbled far below, and he rode the current west where the rapid waters flow. Lots of us had brothers there who would love to show the sights and share the balmy freedom of San Francisco nights. They liked it so much more than anywhere they've been, and we thought that they'd be there when we made it back again. My brother lived in San Francisco. He said he finally found his place. And when I go to San Francisco, everywhere I look, I see his face.
So as we move into phase 2, the year and the time is 1997 to 2009. The theme is the turning tide. We will have this performance, a duet of dancers by Sarah Brooks and Abby Lassiter. The late 1990s brought something many had scarcely dared to imagine: hope. Scientific breakthroughs transformed HIV from a devastating diagnosis into a manageable chronic condition for many. Death rates declined, families were reunited, and communities began to heal. During this period, the speaker continued her steadfast advocacy, helping secure critical investments in HIV research, treatment, and prevention, while elevating healthcare equity on the national and global stage. This next performance celebrates resilience, progress, and the extraordinary turning point that changed the trajectory of the epidemic and brought hope. If you would please join us, we will now watch the interpretation of this time frame by both Sarah Brooks and Abby Lassiter. And now we have reached our last and third vignette. In phase 3, it's from 2010 into the present. The theme is the promise of tomorrow. This will be performed by spoken word artist James J. Spiegel. The theme is the era of PrEP, U equals U, and the possibility of ending this HIV epidemic. Today, we stand in an era that once seemed impossible. Through science, prevention tools like PrEP, and the understanding that undetectable means untransmittable, we can now envision an end to the HIV epidemic. Yet, our work is not complete. Stigma persists, disparities remain, and too many communities still lack equitable access to care. Throughout this journey, the speaker has remained unwavering, championing healthcare, scientific progress, and the dignity of every person affected by HIV. This final vignette looks not only at how far we've come, but also at the promise and the responsibility that we have to the future. Please join me in welcoming our spoken word artist.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here. I moved to San Francisco in the 2000s. I was younger then, a Catholic boy from Ohio, and I thought I knew some things, but I really didn't know anything until I actually moved here, and I was part of the community, and so this is what that poem is about that I'm going to read to you. It's called The God of San Francisco. Some believe the God of San Francisco has taken his throne at the top of Twin Peaks, a mighty Mount Olympus 900 feet above the city, where the kingdom of heaven embraces the kingdom of the bay. At that elevation, it is difficult not to see that something greater guides the way, watches over all creatures and creation, coming and going by bridge and by air, by cable car and ferry. Watch as the west erupts with light, the sun that drops into the Pacific burning brighter than an angel entering the atmosphere. Watch the fog that follows, floats like the Holy Ghost down the rocky hillsides to hang over Hayes Valley, the Haight-Ashbury, the sweet incense of some Catholic mass. Yes, it is difficult not to believe, but they are correct in name and name alone. My Savior has a bar stool at the Twin Peaks Tavern, a window seat to watch the world, where Market Street meets Castro and the rainbow flags flap in the cold of another West Coast wind. I go there when I need religion at a happy hour price, a Bud Light baptism, when I need a good lesson that God has yet to leave us behind. He sits alone, his hands turned to vein and bone, but buy him a martini, vodka with 2 olives, extra dirty, and he will tell you anything you need to know. From the gold rush to North Beach, where the sailors wore dresses over their anchor tattoos, to Jose Sarria and the Black Cat, the Nightingale of Montgomery Street. Yes, those were the days when the prophets wore pearls, when the Bible was burlesque, and the saints mingled with the sinners. The night, a lightning strike of arias and police sirens. God save us, Nelly Queens. He raises a glass to the nevermore, the 21st Street baths, the Elephant Walk, to Harvey and his bullhorn, a drink to the things that slipped away, the bullets that shattered brains, the murder called manslaughter, ushering in those white night riots, the shattered glass of City Hall, cop cars turned to funeral pyres. And he remembers death, coming like it did in Egypt, stealing the firstborn, the secondborn, any young man who fell in love with the twilight over Polk Street, The obituary pages doubling every day with the black and white faces of the men who colored the Castro. He can tell you how he washed the feet of skinny boys with lesions, boys in hospice beds wheeled to the window for one final look at the city at dawn, then wheeled to the morgues with no family to claim their remains. So he took them, all of them, ashes upon ashes collected and released where the ocean waters worship the glory of the Golden Gate. He scattered them in south of market bars where the men in leather tap a keg, toast the life of another dead brother. And he set them free where the winds bow and bend, genuflect for the San Francisco sky, all the bodies that danced in Folsom neon and Freedom Day parades, in disco light and speakeasy darkness, in the soft ballet of love and life, they flutter and float forever, where the oceans wear a halo from the moon and the towers of Twin Peaks glow in the resurrection of the night. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I just want to end by saying that 4 decades ago, a frightened city faced an unimaginable crisis. Families grieved and communities fought for dignity. Scientists searched tirelessly for answers and advocates demanded action. Speaker Nancy Pelosi stood beside the HIV and AIDS community as an advocate, a partner, and a champion for research, healthcare, and hope. Because people chose to care, because communities chose to fight, and because leaders chose courage, millions of lives have been saved. Together and tonight, or today, we honor not only a remarkable public servant, but the enduring truth that compassion, when paired with action, can change the course of history. And as we begin to transition into our fireside chat, and before we invite Joan Hicks and Elizabeth Woods to introduce our next panel, I want to give a special thank you to my partner in art, Thomas Kurtz, who helped with all of this creativity, partnership, and dedication in bringing this portion of the program to life. We are grateful to you and all of our talented performers. I'd also like to thank all of the volunteers and staff from our 4 organizations, especially Seth, for all the beautiful assets that you see, and the Commonwealth Club for your generosity. Please stand for the applause that you've earned in producing this event with us. We will now have Joan Hicks and Elizabeth Woods from the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. Please join us here on stage. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joan Hicks. I'm joined here today by my wonderful colleague, Elizabeth Woods. We're happy to be here on behalf of the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, and we're honored to be here with you all today. Elizabeth Taylor founded ETAF in 1991 to support direct care and services for people living with HIV. After more than 30 years, ETAF remains dedicated to continuing this work today. While it's important to honor how far we've come, it's equally important to ask where we go from here. HIV is no longer the same epidemic it was 40 years ago, but the work is far from over. Scientific breakthroughs, new prevention and treatment options, and advances in care have transformed what's possible. Yet inequities continue to shape who benefits from this progress. In this next conversation, we'll explore the future of HIV, what innovations are on the horizon, the challenges we must still confront, and how we ensure the next chapter is defined by equity, collaboration, and hope.
Please join us in welcoming our panelists for The Future of HIV, Innovation, Equity, and What's Next. Dr. Eric Goosby is an internationally recognized physician and global HIV leader who has served as the U.S. Global AIDS Coordinator and Ambassador at Large. His leadership has helped expand HIV prevention and treatment for millions of people around the world. Dr. Tyler Termeer is Chief Executive Officer of the San Francisco AIDS Foundation and a nationally recognized HIV advocate. Through both his leadership and lived experience, he is advancing health equity, HIV prevention, treatment, and care for communities most impacted by HIV. Dr. Tatiana Moten Santiago is Chief Strategy and Workforce Officer at San Francisco Community Health Center. She is a nationally recognized leader in health equity, workforce development, and LGBTQ+ community health, driving innovative strategies that strengthen systems of care. Aya Banaja is an emerging public health leader and HIV advocate committed to advancing health equity through compassionate, community-centered leadership. She is dedicated to empowering the next generation of leaders and expanding equitable access to HIV prevention and care. To learn more about our panelists, scan the QR code in your program. And passing on to our moderator, Michelle Miao.
Well, we heard from our previous panel. We talked a lot about the last 45 years, but why don't we start with today? What does the face of HIV/AIDS look like today? We'll start with, I think, Dr. Tatiana. It's good to start with you.
Interestingly enough, particularly in this political and social climate that we're in, within the movement of HIV, I wish that I were able to tell you what the face of HIV looked like, particularly because as we're witnessing in this time, as the previous panelists said, effective behavioral interventions are being erased. Data for my community, Black and brown trans women and trans individuals in general, are being erased and removed from CDC's compendium. The data does not exist. And I'm one of those persons who is very intentional about saying, if we cannot see a problem, we can't fix a problem. And the realities of that is that those numbers and those new infections and STI infections, they don't go away. They're shifted to the margins. And for those individuals who we could actually employ some of those early interventions when we're doing testing and prevention, those people are now not seeking service because we have made it in this country to the point where every part of our identities as trans individuals are being criminalized. And so when we are seeking services from the institutions and systems that are supposed to support us as individuals, they're non-existent. And so when asked that question, what does it look like? I wish that I could tell you, because even myself, as a Black trans woman living with HIV, I don't know where to look. And so it's, it's one of those things that's kind of like, yeah, a couple of years ago we would have done that, but at the same token, it's like, we don't know what it looks like, honestly.
Dr. Tamir?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest challenges that we face in the public sphere is that what people think of as the face of HIV is kind of a frozen in time. It's a snapshot, and the reality is that the true face of HIV today is incredibly diverse. While if you look at the overall numbers, the largest concentration still exists among gay and bisexual men, especially those who are Black and Latina. We know that there's an incredibly disproportionate impact of HIV among women, among trans folks, among people who use substances, and our efforts, especially in a place like San Francisco, have to be incredibly targeted on those who have traditionally been furthest from access and opportunity in order to get to the end of the epidemic. I mean, for a city that once was an epicenter, we do, as the earlier panel said, have this amazing opportunity to stand before the rest of the world to say that we were the first to get to the end. But I think it's going to take a very specific effort of us prioritizing our resources, ensuring that we're not taking steps back by disinvesting in the communities that need us the most, which is incredibly challenging in this particular environment. And I think as I was thinking about this question, my gut response was to say that today's epidemic is no longer defined by what's scientifically possible. It's defined by who has access to those possibilities. And it's essentially because in this environment, so many folks are kept away from possibility.
Dr. Gooseby?
Well, thanks. I think the face of HIV is a human face. It has always been a human face. It started as a human face from the very beginning as it moved into populations that participated in behavior that favored transmission. It took us a long time to recognize that, understand it, understand and appreciate the mode of transmission and what that risk really looked like, how that virus moved through the community and then moved through individuals. All of that understanding launched in 1980-81, all at the same time in multiple spots, but there were centers of activity that kept identifying problems, issues of access, issues of retention over the duration of an illness, and I think the confusion that we had with an illness that presented with infectious diseases as the main and first manifestations of the illness, it took us a long time to understand that natural history. But the importance of the data collection that Mike said in the first panel, I can't emphasize that our only ability to understand what we saw was because of the data. The fact that data is now less important, less part of the argument, does not mean we cannot continue to collect it. It is the argument. And whether it's there at the beginning or somewhere once you've engaged political leadership in making an allocation decision, it becomes the tools of the argument. But I will say, as the speaker said, I've never seen the data win an argument, but I've seen it keep an argument on the plate. And I've seen the importance of that, not in 1 year, but in a 10, 15-year time frame. So.
Then this is an assumption, but it's also the truth. You're the youngest here on the panel. So it's interesting to hear from you, your perspective of what the face of HIV/AIDS looks like today as a youth perspective.
Yeah, I was really having a hard time with envisioning what the face of HIV would even look like. And I love the sentiment of it's a human face. And I think that my idea of what HIV is and what it looks like is completely shaped by my education. And while I was kind of grappling with that question, I realized my education has completely failed me in the sense that I wasn't taught a lot about HIV. And it took me, as a little bit over a teenage year, going and doing that research on my own. And I think that what might surprise a lot of people is that the mental image of what HIV was in the most stigmatized way still exists today. And so it's really hard to go out there and create my own idea of what HIV looks like when you look at the media and you look at what exists still in history textbooks and all of those things, and try and form an image when I wasn't alive to experience those things. And so really what has created my image of what HIV looks like is community like this and learning from people who are from a different generation than me. And so I really think that now it's largely shaped by the inequities that exist in the system, and kind of exactly what was said as well, that the science and the scientific advancements are amazing. And that's what I've grown up knowing, is that there are amazing treatments for HIV, but the inequity in who accesses that and who is being educated about that is really what I've seen growing up.
To your point, the second follow-up question to all of that is really focused on what was said earlier, right? There's a perpetuation of the new infections and cases that we see, and then who that affects is because of that perpetuation. So how has the cuts, the data erasure, everything that's happening right now currently, how has that affected your work, and what are you seeing on the ground? We'll start with Dr. Tatiana.
Absolutely. My CEO alluded to earlier, we received a phone call at the early part of this year from our CDC project officer telling us, well, we were funded to do work around STI prevention in trans communities. And through that work, and my colleague Janelle Butler, who was our director of trans services, and other folks that were involved in that had brought in other trans individuals, particularly young trans women, to establish what we were calling the Rose Sorority. And so these were peer leaders that were involved in the community that were bringing young trans women in to get involved and get active around their healthcare and their prevention work. And in that phone call, what we were told is that you can continue to provide services, but you cannot provide services for that community. Their phrasings. And so I want folks to think about this. 2 years ago, CDC issued a policy brief that said 67% of Black and brown transgender women living within San Francisco are either living with HIV or at risk for contracting HIV. 67%. and you would call that very jurisdiction and the agency that is at the forefront of preventing those new infections and say that we can continue to provide services, but not for that community. As a Black transgender woman who is the co-author of the first intervention written by CDC specifically for transgender women, this was personal for me. And so when my CEO and our board decided to make that choice with the AIDS Foundation to sue this administration, and I have to add this also context, I served 8 years honorably as a trans veteran to this country, and to be put into a position where not only this president, but this administration has said to me that those contributions of myself and others like me did not matter, but even more so that I fought for the right for you to hate me. And that hate doesn't just show up in words. It shows up in systems. It shows up in violence in policy. It shows up in the emboldening of other folks that are outside of our communities to see that our lives are not valued. And so for us that have been continuously working within this workforce to eliminate and minimize a lot of those disparities, what it said to us even in that moment, because I want folks to also understand that I have first-person lived experience. So I've not had a moment to take and say, hey, let me consider my own humanity. Because in the process of all of that, and even getting back to the beginnings of this fight, the HIV and the AIDS response was a radical movement. And so recognizing that no one is coming to save us. And so for organizations like ours and others, we immediately switched into what are we going to do for this fight? Pooling our resources, conversations that were happening that were not traditional in the space of pooling resources and gathering in coalitions to also look at grant funding. Because again, this does not stop. We are intersectional people living intersectional lives, and in one area that you're solely focused on that is impacting us, and that's something even for other folks to understand. This fight is not just a trans fight. This is a fight for every person in this room, because I recognized early on, particularly as soon as I received my diagnosis, that this is not just about me. I'm thinking about those people who have to come in after me. And so I'm always keeping that at the forefront of my mind, because I know that there's a young person out there who is experiencing and navigating these systems that they had no choosing on. And I want those systems of care to be there for them. Because for trans women like me, we've been that system of care. Early on in the 80s, we were the house mothers. We were those care systems that were going into the hospitals and holding people's hands and mothering and taking people to their appointments. And so when we're looking at the infrastructure that is being destroyed, and even I talked about the Rose Sorority, those women and that community trust that has been built, now all of that goes away. And so what do we say to those women, to those young trans men and non-binary siblings? What's there for them?
Thank you for that. Yep. Dr. Tremere, I think now's a good time to talk about suing the President of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild thing, right? I think we thought we could be as prepared as we could be for the day that this administration stepped back into office. And I think as CEOs leading HIV and LGBTQ organizations across the country, we were incredibly apprehensive about what those first few weeks would look like, but we had no idea how intense it would be. And as many of you probably remember, it was incredibly intense those first few weeks. We saw executive orders flying out of DC that were asking us to do things that were an existential threat to our mission, to no longer support diversity, equity, and inclusion, to support the erasure of people who work on our staff, who we support every day, who we love, who we uplift. And those were things that we would not, in a heartbeat, even think about doing. And so our colleagues at Lambda Legal have been amazing over the last year for many folks, but right off the bat were amazing for our organizations. several of which are here in California, 2 of which are San Francisco AIDS Foundation, San Francisco Community Health Center. And it's not an easy thing. I will give it to both Lance and I, which I don't do often, pat on the back, to walk into your board and say, hey, I want to sue the president. What do you think about it? But we did. And what I will tell you on behalf of San Francisco AIDS Foundation is I am so proud of our board and of our agency for standing so strong behind our values. And we knew that there were going to be risks involved, and that that was both risks for our agency, for future funding, but also individual risks for ourselves, for people who were going to put ourselves so visibly out there. Luckily, we fought, and we've had some wins. We have a preliminary injunction that's currently in place. And that right now is protecting multiple organizations, including the 2 I've just named, across the country against 3 executive orders, 2 of the DEI orders, and a gender ideology order. It's allowing us to fulfill our mission, to support our communities, to be loud and proud about who we are in ways that others, unfortunately, have to walk a very fine line. And we've been able to claw back money along the way, which has been a huge victory for us.
Yes. Dr. Goosby, if you could answer the question of how what's happening currently has affected your work, but maybe your remarks can touch on a global perspective, especially with regards to PEPFAR.
Well, the shock that you all have reflected in your answers was part of my reality as well. The burden of disease being largely elsewhere than our domestic burden, which is large enough and ignored enough as is. But the need for a response to those also infected that were not in our country was part of the calling that pulled me from a 100% domestic focus with Ryan White, first founding director of that, implemented in 57 different epicenter cities across the United States. I only dealt with domestic AIDS-related, dedicated, mostly academic medical center responses. Then got a lot of criticism for what are you doing? It kind of crescendoed up to the Vancouver AIDS meeting was the meeting where it really hit the media and hit the population as not on our watch. This cannot stand, and why are we letting it stand? To have 78% of the burden of disease not get in front of a treatment response was the standard on the planet. We had countries that were 20, 30% infected in their populations, everyone in the population, not just high-risk groups. A different type of epidemic ran its course globally, and it was predominantly heterosexual and predominantly in resource-poor settings that had no healthcare in general, let alone sophisticated healthcare that HIV was requiring. When treatments became effective and started to prolong life in '94, that became unconscionable for the global sensibilities. And a drumbeat that started then and never really stopped brought an awareness and attention that was led with data. The data kept the attention on it. And we have almost 20 years of looking at something, 10, 15 years in epicenter spots globally that were unresponded to, had to come in after the fact and build a credible continuum of care and services. And that term became the Ryan White kind of mantra. That continuum of care and services was the San Francisco model that had a core of services that were needed in the medical context, but enabling services around that identified, entered, and retained patients in care for the duration of their illness, their whole life. And as treatment got better and as people started to die from other things, it evolved with it. But it was always that patient response to the service needs that changed first, that the community system responded to, and built that San Francisco model that truly, with the PEPFAR resource motor, went global. And the basic approach to healthcare in every PEPFAR country was a reflection, direct reflection, point for point, access point for access point, risk group for risk group. We did the same thing we did in the epicenter cities in the United States and every other country. So I am humbled to think of the 27 million people that have been affected by that, but I am most proud of the San Francisco model that created the foundation and has kept on giving to those in need all over the planet. Kind of a remarkable story. I could say a similar one for the science had a similar application that no one would have predicted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It is a fireside chat, and it's meant to be that, a fire. Then keep it going. I'm looking at the clock, and we got a minute left, so I'll just jump to the future. And although we are in the defense, or it feels that way, and we are modeling the same caregiving models that we have been for the last 45 years and increasing that kind of approach to how we defend ourselves today, I think as advocates, activists, scientists, doctors, I mean, there's a lot that we can also look to as far as the future. And so we'll start with Aya, if you could leave us with what your wish for as far as the future of HIV/AIDS.
I think that my future is a lot of different things, and I think that also just being here today has really showed me what I hope for the future, and I think that having more youth voices involved in these conversations is so incredibly important. And I know that even me just being here for the last few hours has taught me so much, and I hope that in the future we can hear from other generations and also know that progress is possible with the current administration as it is. Because it's really easy to focus on the big issues and not think about the ways in which we can still progress. And I think that having other generations kind of let us also have a voice. And, as we were talking about education as well, I think that having space for the youth voice to kind of tell others what we want and be able to tell you, I want a comprehensive sex education. I want to learn about HIV. I think that that's something that you need to hear from us for you to then also continue the work. And so I really think that letting our voices be heard in other spaces, because this is a one in a lifetime opportunity for my voice to be heard. I'm in my 20s. And so I really think that, letting us have that voice in these spaces is so important so that we can tell you what we want.
Yeah. 100%.
For me, it would be that not only are Black and brown trans women the recipients of services and those supportive services, but we're leading it. Speaker Emerita, you said in your book, Know Your Power, as you accepted that gavel from Speaker Boehner, we have not been waiting. We have been working. Mm-hmm. And for Black and brown transgender women, we have always been in this fight. We have always been impacted by this epidemic. And so why is it that we are being put into positions where we are able to lead those fights and this fight against all of the things that we are experiencing in this country? And so as I look towards that future, I do believe that we will get there.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, I am working every day alongside this phenomenal team at San Francisco AIDS Foundation and all of our community partners across the city and across the nation to achieve a world where one day HIV isn't determined by your zip code or your age or your sex or your gender ideology or your gender. Say that word way too often. By your gender orientation, and I want to live in that world. I want a world where prevention and treatment aren't just expected, but they're exceptional for everyone who needs it and wants it, and a world where LGBTQ young people are able to show up freely as their authentic selves, and that the access they need to healthcare is there freely for them, and it's not being erased straight out in front of them. And I think a future where aging with HIV is celebrated and is fully funded in a way that it needs to be, rather than it having to be a fight like it was for them in the very beginning. It feels like a full circle moment for so many of our long-term survivors.
Yeah.
Well, I would say I would like for there to be a theme of accountability that begins now and extends both retro and moving forward. We can't let what has happened in the last year and a half stand unchallenged. We have to demand healthcare as a human right. It is something that we deserve as human beings on the planet, and we should hold governments accountable to deliver it. And not sort of, not kind of, not for some, but for everyone. And begin the discussion there. The managed care insurance carnage that has occurred in our systems has gone largely unchallenged by our profession in the domestic response, something we haven't owned enough, something that has really gone undescribed, needs to be described, but it's the same discussion for the global fight. The tragedy of pulling back resources that had taken 27 years to stand up in resource settings that will be very difficult to come back to and put that continuum of care back in place is unconscionable. We need to document the entire carnage that was created and reverberates post replenishment of grant. We need to understand how this was a stagnant, complacent pond with pebbles thrown in it, and those ripples went right out to the edge of that pond, and they're hitting with tsunami impact in some instances. We can avoid most of them if we're smart about how we reintroduce the continuums of care that we've interrupted. We are smart enough to do that. We have enough infrastructure to do it in an excellent way still if we re-engage. I'm worried that the barriers that have been put up to healthcare access and the continuation of the delivery system needed have been interrupted, and too many people are saying, oh, that's really a shame, but are not realizing you cannot accept that as a given. It is not a given, and we as a professional community, and global health, in domestic health, have to say, not on our watch.
Thank you so much, Aya Banaja, Dr. Tatiana Moten, and Dr. Eric Goosby and Dr. Tyler Tremere. Thank you for your time, and here's to the work for the future. This concludes our fireside chat portion of our program. Let's give one more round of applause. We love to give them. We're actually now going to direct your attention to the screen for our special film tribute produced by Octavian Kelly and Echelon Films, which includes a collection of memories from our host organizations in Greater San Francisco, honoring Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, whose enduring partnership with the HIV community. Please enjoy.
San Francisco has always been a haven for the lost. It is a city built by thousands of people who came and could become entirely themselves. A place where you could inhale freedom and exhale the weight of judgment. It was the early 1980s, and no one in that crowd knew what was coming. It started quietly, a rumor, a rare illness with no name. Then it wasn't quiet anymore. By the early 1980s, San Francisco was losing its sons faster than it could bury them. Hospital wards filled, families turned away. A generation of gay men, artists, nurses, bartenders, brothers, watched each other disappear, with almost no one in power willing to say the word out loud. This is the story of what the community did instead.
Early on, many of us were going to 2 funerals a day, but out of darkness and despair, our community forged healing and hope.
In In 1987, a freshman congresswoman walked onto the floor of the House with a message almost no one else there wanted to hear. A message that took the pain of the people seriously.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. The most urgent health issue facing our community is AIDS. Last March, I introduced a bill which would assist in financing AIDS patient care. Included in the bill were early intervention projects for people infected with the AIDS virus and mental health projects for people affected by AIDS and ARC.
Nancy Pelosi didn't run for Congress promising to become Speaker. She ran promising to fight for a city that was dying.
I have served for many years as an officer and leader of the Democratic Party and as chairperson of the California Democratic Party. For over 25 years, I've worked on issues trying to turn good ideas that people at the grassroots level have into legislation, into better policy.
And largely being ignored. She kept that promise for 40 years. Bill after bill, budget after budget. No matter what, she stood for what was right. And by standing up, she inspired others to stand up too.
I had the opportunity to intern for Speaker Emerita Pelosi. I've been fortunate to benefit from her mentorship and guidance, and she has played a similar role for generations of leaders in our city. So, on behalf of a grateful city, thank you, Speaker Emerita.
When federal support for AIDS care ran dry, she fought to backfill it, helping secure the Ryan White funding that kept clinics open when the stopgaps ran out. This wasn't a single vote, it was a career-long through line, consistent, unglamorous, relentless. Ask the people who lived it, and they don't talk about policy. They talk about what it meant to be seen. They remember someone in Washington who returned their calls, who showed up, who treated a gay disease like the national emergency it was, years before most of her colleagues would say so.
This quilt is the family home for the countless men and women who lost their lives, and to those who love and remember them. So let us keep it for all time and never give up on any soul, for we all are human and we must respect the dignity and the worth of all human.
The quilt became a way to grieve, in public, what the country wouldn't grieve together. And San Francisco's fight for care became a model the rest of the nation would eventually follow.
For at the core of the AIDS crisis is injustice. Let's not kid ourselves. It was injustice, but we have communities that have stood up and fought back for generations and will continue to make that good fight today.
40 years later, the epidemic isn't over. But the model San Francisco built, community-based, dignity-first care, changed how the world responds to HIV. It was built by grassroots organizers, by caregivers who had no training manual, only each other, by a community that decided no one would face this alone. It was carried forward, side by side, with someone in power who never stopped showing up for it. The work isn't finished, but because of what was built here, because of the people who refused to look away, more of us are here to keep building it. As Herb Caen wrote, a city is not gauged by its length and width, but by the broadness of its vision and the height of its dreams. Let's broaden our vision and heighten our dreams. Let's keep fighting for the sake of San Francisco.
Please welcome Lance Toma of the San Francisco Community Health Center back on the stage.
Oh my gosh. Well, yes, we are at the, please come up to the stage, Speaker Pelosi. So we are at the final. Oh, please, here. Of course. There you go. Oh my gosh, fabulous. So we have one last act of love and a bit of a surprise. We are honored with you all to introduce the Nancy Pelosi HIV Trailblazer Award. A new recognition, yes. It's a new recognition that will celebrate individuals whose leadership and commitment continue to advance the HIV movement and strengthen our communities. And as it is just so abundantly clear, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi is the inaugural recipient, and this award will become a lasting tradition, rotating amongst our host organizations each year, as we will commit to honoring leaders who embody the same spirit of advocacy, collaboration, and service. Speaker Pelosi, on behalf of PRC, National AIDS Memorial, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and San Francisco Community Health Center, it is the greatest honor to be able to present you with the inaugural Nancy Pelosi HIV Trailblazer Award.
Thank you. Thank you, Lance. It is my great honor to introduce the artist that created this inaugural award. I've had the privilege to experience the power and the beauty of Serge Gay Jr.'s renowned art for over the last several years. Serge is a multidisciplinary artist, creative director, and muralist living here in San Francisco, celebrated for his surrealist visual storytelling, whose work bridges fine art, public art, and social activism. His practice draws on urban experiences, diasporic identity, and the interplay between visible and hidden narratives. Over his career, he has painted more than 30 murals across the Bay Area representing the LGBT community, collaborated on film and video projects, including a Grammy-nominated short-form video, and contributed to the community-driven initiatives with partners such as the National AIDS Memorial, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, Oasis Arts, Levi's, UCSF, and as a board member of the Friends of Harvey Milk Plaza. His latest public works are featured in an exhibition currently at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts titled Conjuring Power, Roots and Futures of Queer and Trans Movements, which will be there until August 23rd. Please help me in welcoming to the stage Serge Gay Jr.
Thank you. How you doing? Thank you. It's a pleasure. Oh. Yeah. I'm truly honored to be able, and thank you, John, and everybody at PRC and also the AIDS Foundation to kind of get me to create something memorable for you. And what a unique way to kind of give you an award, something that you can keep and kind of reflect your legacy. And when we were talking about this, it was how do we put so much of your achievement and have so much of what you have done for our nation, but I really wanted to capture something that's really dear to your heart, which is San Francisco and the achievement you have done in San Francisco. And what's starting is, of course, you present as like the symbol of what you have done in your suit. And when we were thinking of like, you have so many colors and suits, and like, what would be like the one that really drawn? And for some reason, I thought the blue, and of course, to represent like Democratic Party blue. And as you're holding your gavel and what you represent in Congress, but also seeing when you do come home in San Francisco, looking at the beauty you have also been a big part of in our community, in our city. And as you see, you're looking over the Presidio and the Golden Gate Bridge, which is such like a welcoming to the city image, and a close kind of like off note of like for me when I came to San Francisco in the year of 2007, the year that you became first House Speaker. And it meant so much to me. And then also my husband's here. I met him that year, and I fell in love with San Francisco, and one of our favorite things to do is to go running in the Presidio. And for you to be part of that, and the Presidio could have been another golf course, another high rise somewhere, but you made it very prominent to make it a park space that is contributing to all of us in San Francisco, how much is dear to us. As you're standing over this marble ceiling that you have created, which is the Palace of Fine Arts, and then I really wanted to create this kind of saying that I heard you said one time that was very dear, which is, Lord, make me the instrument of that peace, from St. Francis, that you kind of hit me so well, and a very representation of who you are, and when the idea of peace, and then kind of drawing to, I don't want to block anybody, I'll come over here. This kind of doorway of kind of like entering a home, and which is representing the National AIDS Memorial Grove, in which you have helped create this park and this memorial. I don't try not to get too teary as well. And when I use a sense of colors, I use like warm colors when I want to feel like when you're entering a home and you have created this kind of, when people come and visit, this kind of home environment of the park that people can come, the loved ones can come and see. And the idea of like peace, I think of also like peace and mental peace for a lot of loved ones who can actually come to the Grove to kind of mourn or know that their loved one is remembered. And the top of that, which is in the saying honoring lives and preserving history, is something very big in our community. So we will make sure that we want to preserve those memories. And then with the flowers, we all want to give you your flowers. But then on top, those flowers are California wildflowers that also represent us in the Presidio, like the Presidio, the poppies and the Presidio, I forgot what that's called. And then with that, when we do have so much work to do with this cypress tree, kind of also building that we have a long way to go with fighting HIV and AIDS, and how is this message and what you have created to make this national memorial, and how it's spreading throughout, not just in our city, but also in the world, and is with your help. And then with little tiny details is that each bird kind of represent Paul and your 5 kids. And just to show that you're always there. Always being there with you, and then you are looking out to the city you love, but also into the future and your next step. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Meet your husband.
Yeah, she's over there. Yeah.
I say something?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I could use my mother of 5 voice. But I think well, words are inadequate for me right now to express the appreciation that I have. I first thought when Serge walked on the stage and they were about to unveil this, I thought, that's for me? I thought we were giving it to somebody else in my name, but to somebody else. So overwhelmed was really what I was. But that is totally, again, inadequate to express my appreciation for all of this, for what was said here. Isn't it exciting, though, how the arts just take us to another place? Sarah and Abby with their dancing, Clara and Emmett with this song, the music, and again, James Siegel with his poem, and thank you for mentioning Harvey in that poem, and now this painting that Serge has brought forth, and having in there, of course, John, when you mentioned the Grove, actually, the reason we have how we got the national designation was we had the bill for the Presidio, the bill to go from post to park for the Presidio, very bipartisan. Never a shot fired in anger at the Presidio, nor in our legislative battle there for it. And in that legislation was the designation of San Francisco to have the National AIDS Memorial Grove. So John, with his leadership there, as well as with the quilt being the memorial as well, has been such a tremendous leader. Thank you, John, for all that you have done and led us. Community centers are really, if I ruled the world, I would blanket the whole world with community health centers. Dr. Bombardier, we would have hospitals too, but we would start in the community where it's culturally and linguistically and in every way comfortable for people to be. Tyler, where'd he go? There, right here. Tyler, thank you for the AIDS Foundation and what you have done. You know I'm very aware of it, and I have not only appreciated but enjoyed when we have come together in that regard. And again, thank you, Dr. Hawks. You just have been so remarkable. But everyone, we learn so much to listen to the young, to think, as Michael said, on evidence-based policy. Dr. Goosby talking globally about it, and that's so very important. In fact, and just one thing about Dr. Goosby, and that is he was so helpful to us all when we were trying to say, let these countries be able to create their own pharmaceuticals. Don't let it just be about us giving them. Let's give them the technologies and the rest, or make it open for them, trade-wise, for them to take responsibility. Not take responsibility, use their intellect, because they have the talent and the rest. So it was a compliment as well as a responsibility we had. So anyway, we go on and on about it. You think we probably will, but in this grove, or I already have, as my kids would say, too long for it to be a brief speech, Mom. When we talked about the quilt, I said to you that I told Clive, Clive, nobody sews. Well, I did end up sewing, and it was for a little girl who was bridesmaid, a flower girl in my wedding, died of HIV/AIDS, and we did a quilt for her, and for Scott Douglas, who was active in the gay community all those years ago, and I would go see him all the time. Not in the same way as I called Michael all the time, because I was more hopeful in Michael's stage, but this was terminal at the time. And when I went to see him one day to see if I should be turning up his morphine, don't tell anybody I said that, he said, "You again?" I said, "Well, how are you today?" He said, "Well, I awakened. I thought I was leaving here and I was going to see John F. Kennedy, Thomas Jefferson, and all the rest in heaven, and now I'm seeing you again." But then again, our faith, that's it. And I just have to say this one more thing, because the community did so much. And as I say to you, anything anybody says to me, I say, we did it all together. And it isn't even a nice thing to say. It's an absolute, total fact and demonstrated fact. But the thing is that with all of that, the community came a very long way. You know, that my last bill, as I said for Speaker's first session, 2 years first session, was to sign the bill for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And thank you for sharing Tatiana's story about her service. And then the next term, when I was Speaker 2 more terms, the last bill I signed was the Respect for Marriage. They bill to make sure that they couldn't reverse any decision in the court on respect for marriage. And everything with the LGBT community had taken advance. It was nothing. Corporations were seeking out the best talent. And so we see leadership in every aspect of our community, whether it's corporate, whether it was military, whether academic, and all the rest. But then they glommed on to the trans issue in the most vicious way. I can't even tell you. Some of my colleagues have trans kids. I have a grandniece, not niece, but grandniece. They would put up signs outside, God made men, God made boys, God made, all that stuff. Vicious. These are supposedly people of faith. Give me a break. Wow. And so understand that this is the fight now. As I said to you before, it was 2009 when we passed that bill and they said you could take out trans. Well, we're not doing it. But right now they've made that the fight because they see a market for some of it, whether it's sports or bathrooms, I guess is a big deal for them. I don't know why. But in any case, we have to make sure that everybody knows we're all in this fight, all together for that, because it is an insult to the humanity of all of us for them to act that way in the trans thing. It breaks my heart. Meet with these young girls who are homeless on the street, trans kids, homeless on the street, rejected by their families, or to see families glorying, just loving their children and the rest. We have to make sure that's the world we live in. So I'm honored to have this award. You can just imagine. And I accept it on behalf of all of you. Thank you very much. And I can't wait until we give it to somebody else next year. Thank you all so much.
I'm going up on stage after. All right, once more, San Francisco Youth Chorus.
They gave us our instruction to smile. Thank you so much, San Francisco Youth Chorus. Weren't they wonderful? Again, the arts taking us to a place where we can laugh together, be inspired together, even though we may not always agree on everything. Well, of course, in this room we do, but in other places. Thank heavens for the arts, and thank you for just elevating our spirits in such a beautiful way that we can do nothing but smile. Thank you so much.
All right. As the chorus exits the stage, I'd like to welcome back our 4 leaders of our host organizations, Dr. Tyler Tremere, Lance Toma, Dr. Deborah Hawks, and John Cunningham. If you can come up on the stage.
Am I staying?
And if you'd like, you could do whatever you want, Speaker Emerita.
I didn't know whether I was supposed to go or come.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing because it looks
Yeah.
like it has a hole.
Yeah. And also, we'd like to welcome Tasha Henneman to the stage, please. Before we say goodbye, and obviously it's not goodbye forever, please mingle and hang out. We do still have refreshments out there. We want to close by thanking Tasha for her hard work, for bringing us all together. It really was your vision and your manifestation in making today happen. And so thank you, Tasha. All right. Well, this does conclude our program officially. Again, let's hang out, give hugs, and smile. Join us in the reception hall for more refreshments and photos, maybe. Let's give huge thanks also to our host organizations, all of our sponsors today, the Commonwealth Club, all of our speakers, and last but not least, and it's not goodbye, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. We'll see you out there.